Okay, so another video, and we're out on on location today, and we're going to be talking about street photography and the Sony A7cii, which I mentioned in the previous video. And since doing that, I've had quite a few people come back and say, tell us about street photography, show us some photos, how you're using the camera for loads of stuff like that. So that's what this video is about. I was a little bit dubious about this when I first got it, and when I think I did the last video, I'd been out for one shoot with it, and I found it a little bit confusing, which was surprising as I've had Sonys before. But I've now, I won't say I've got to grips with it, but at least I've found some settings which make it much more usable for street photography for me. Now, let me just explain what my street photography is. Here's some shots from some stuff I did fairly recently, and they're not what you would call normal street photography. Normal street photography is pictures of people walking around city centres, towns, sort of doing, I don't know, sort of people stuff, about capturing a particular moment, about maybe getting someone with a red umbrella walking past a red billboard, or you know, stuff like that. The people, the person is the subject, and it's very obviously the subject. Now, it might be done with some clever shadow and light, black and white, whatever, but at the end of the day, it's about people. That's not my photography. Mine is much more inspired by Saul Leiter. If you don't know Saul, I don't know Saul. He died a few years ago. Look him up. He was a New York street photographer, and much more abstract, impressionistic, about the use of colour, shapes, textures, layers, and all this kind of stuff, and that's what I'm into, because I'm into more kind of abstract stuff. If you know Mark Rothko, I like some of his paintings. Very simple, sort of 3 bands of colour, so quite abstract. And in fact, just as a sideline, my favourite photo that I've ever done, that's been hanging in my house, all my houses, since about mid-90s, is a photo I took at about 4:30 in the morning on an August, down on the south coast in the UK. It was my, I can't remember, 2nd or 3rd day of trying. I know I didn't get it right on the first day, or the weather wasn't right, but it was about half an hour before sunrise. The sky was just starting to get light. It was no longer completely dark, but it certainly wasn't a sunrise. And all it is 3 bands of colour. You've got the sky is a kind of slightly light, purpley, reddish sort of colour, but quite subtle. Then there's the sea, which is sort of reflecting that colour and a shade darker. And then you've got the land. And it's just basically 3 bands of colour, and that's my favourite ever photo. So that's where I'm coming from street photography. All my photos have people in, but people are simply part of the scene. The photo isn't about the person. I believe it must have at least a person in, because otherwise it just becomes an architectural shot. By adding at least one person in, it then connects this scene to us human beings. So that's the basis of my photography. The components that make it up, for me, are light, obviously, first. Light and shadow. Colour is important. Simplicity, layers, frames, texture, and then of course people mixed in with that. So I'm just off now to play with this guy. Let me very briefly mention what I've done with this. I've set this up so that on U1, the user one at the top here, it's completely manual. I've got my Voigtlander 40mm 1.4 lens for my Leica on here, and I'm using, if you're interested, oh, it's a K&F concept adapter. Very simple, brilliant, works lovely. Obviously no contacts, completely manual, and I've set the camera up so that I've got obviously the aperture on the lens, I've got the back dial is my speed, and the front dial I've set up to be my ISO, so I can very easily get the correct exposure, and that's quite important actually. Street photography is quite difficult from two aspects. First of all, focus can be a problem, and secondly, exposure can be a problem, because whereas at a wedding, then I'm obviously focusing on the bride, the groom, whatever. It's very obvious, and obviously all the clever stuff that we get these days, face detect, eye autofocus, does come in useful. Not so much for street photography, because people are not the subject. It might be the sun hitting a wall opposite, it might be the reflection in a shop window, it could be raindrops on a shop window. It makes focusing a lot more subjective, and I find that it can take longer to actually get the camera to do what you want to do in AF than it is to just use manual focus and just focus on what it is you want to focus on. So that's the reason I'm using this lens rather than my my 51.8 lens. And then exposure, same sort of problem. At a wedding, I'm focusing on the bride, groom, whatever, and they have to be correctly exposed. I might vary it slightly depending if I want some really dark shadows or I've got some really blown out highlights which I want to get back. Then I may vary it slightly, but it's basically about people. So again, that's fairly straightforward. Exposure in street photography, certainly on a day like today where we have got the sun out, we're going to have some bright highlights, we're going to have some dark shadows. What do I want the focus to say? Maybe I want to take those shadows and make them completely black. Maybe I want the highlights and blow them out completely. So it's much more subjective, and therefore manual focus is the way to go, rather than trying to get the camera to do the work for you and then finding it's not really what I wanted anyway. So I'm off to do that. We'll have a look at the photos I get when I get back home, pop them into Lightroom, and I'll be back and we'll have a chat about the photos. See you then. Hi, and sorry, it's the next day. Got a bit tied up yesterday when I got back. So managed to get some shots yesterday. It was just in my local town, nothing special. The only thing in my favour was the sun was out, which gave me a chance to get some a certain type of shots. And I got to like this a little bit more, in fact a lot more. I found it was actually really easy to use. The screen, the flip out screen, I was able to photograph someone, actually I don't know if I can show you, sort of flipped out 45 degrees. So I was kind of here looking at the screen, and I've got the lens pointing at the guy I was photographing. Had no idea I was even, thinking about taking a photo of him. I'll show you that one in a minute in Lightroom. Like the way I've now got this set up, so I've got ISO on the front dial, speed on the back dial, and when I had the manual focus lens on, the Leica lens, I obviously had the aperture ring, which is missing on the 51.8, the cheap nifty 50. So I'm decided this is definitely staying. It's a lovely camera. It's much easier to use than the Leica. The actual image quality is so comparable. I'm not really particularly fussed about the image quality, which is all down to character and colours, and all of which you can change in Lightroom anyway these days. So what I decided was, if I had a lens which had an aperture ring, so I can do the aperture on the lens, I can do the ISO on the front dial, speed on the back dial, that would be absolutely perfect for street. In fact, for most forms of photography, if you can do it quickly and easily like that. I mean, even my ZF, I can't do that because no one makes a lens, a Z-mount lens, with an aperture ring on. It's crazy. We're photographers. Why don't you give us an aperture ring? Stupid. So in some ways, this is even better to use than the ZF. Plus, of course, it's about half the weight and 2/3 the size, which for street photography I think is good. If I do want, so that's completely manual exposure. If I do want, I can just quickly go back to aperture priority, and we've got a camera that sorts the exposure out itself. So yeah, I like it. So I've ordered the 40mm 2.5 G lens, which has got an aperture ring. The size and weight, I think it actually looks from what I see to be a tiny bit smaller than the 51.8 here, but you know, basically the same sort of size. Whereas of course if you go to the next step up, to the G Master lenses, which I had when I was shooting weddings with Sony, I mean they're 3 times the size of this and a heck of a lot heavier, would make the camera very front heavy. So I think the G 2.5 lens is the answer. So let's now lift it to Lightroom, have a look at some photos, give me your thoughts by all means. I'm not the world's best street photographer. I am coming from doing weddings, transitioning to doing a lot more street photography. I want to get better at it, and for me it's going to be all about practice, as I'm sure it's going to be for most people. So let's have a look at Lightroom. Okay, so I've selected, I actually took 61 photos when I was out, and let me just show you those. I've selected 7 that I've edited because of where I was in Bury St Edmunds, and because it was a nice sunny day. I was looking for reflections, textures. Tried to get a shot through a car window with someone actually sitting in the car, which is when I did that that screen tilted round and I was at 90 degrees, so I was just looking down the road and the camera was pointing through the car. As I say, she didn't even have a clue that I was taking photos, so it made life very easy. As you can see, just mostly very ordinary shots. The reason I took this, I liked the colour of the shop, and this guy I could see walking down the road, and I thought his top would match the colour of that quite well. Didn't really work out to be much of a photo, I have to say. Here's some texture in the corner, which I thought if we drop the exposure or the shadows, I'd get a nice edge, but that didn't really work out. Wanted the city map here, but not sure what I was shooting at. I think I must have shot this at 1.4 wide open, which I shouldn't have done. I should really have been shooting maybe at f5.6 or something like that, because this guy is too blown out and the background's too blown out. But it's all about learning, isn't it? I have to learn the same as anyone else does, and looks like I probably change the aperture here. Of course, being a Leica lens on a dumb converter, it doesn't transmit any EXIF data, so I'm not sure, but I would say this was probably more like 5.6. Still didn't work out to be much of a photo. Other one there, let's just keep going. No, this one, just an ordinary reflection shot, nothing special about that. Then we started to get on to, I found this pillar opposite this cafe, actually, with some bright pillars outside, and I liked the mix of the texture against the bright pillars, and this is where my first good shot that I got came in. Took quite a bit of playing around to get the right aperture, so that I got some of the texture but also got some detail in the background, and then of course wait for the right moment. And this is the first shot that I've saved as being a fairly interesting shot. So we've got the texture of the marble, it's kind of a marble sort of pillar that I've got this reflection off of, and I saw this guy coming along, and because the sun was over here on the left, we've got shadows being cast behind, Don't know what it's detecting. Sorry, it's gone and done something stupid. Let's come back to that. And purely by luck, I don't know. I mean, as you can see, I took an awful lot of shots from exactly the same place. So I was quite patient and kept at it. And I got this shot with him on this pillar and his shadow on this pillar, which I thought was quite interesting. Combined with the texture, I quite like that. I was hoping to get some shots through the archway here, but that didn't really turn into much until I changed position and got to this shot here, where I got a reflection of some other bits here, someone walking past. I have edited this a fair bit. Let me show you the before, because I had a couple of things which were a real distraction. We had a street sign here which was right in the way, and if I moved to try and get that out of the way, this area here became just a really small sliver and wasn't big enough to get a photo of someone walking past, so I lost the human element. So this is where AI comes in. I just used the remove tool, got rid of that sign, and then just played around with exposure. And I quite like that. That's quite an interesting sort of street shot for me. Then I saw a nice sort of black and white shot, probably, with the light here, some interesting shapes being made with the building. So I thought if I could get a shot with not too many people walking through this alleyway, I might have an interesting shot. And that's as good as it got. If I actually zoom in, I didn't actually, when I get home and look at it, that background is way too busy to have someone silhouetted against. I needed something big and white, and it's just too busy. It didn't really work very well. This one. Now I then was walking around and looking for colours, not just reflections, and I saw some colours here. I saw the green and the blue, and this was actually, to my eyes in real life, well, was a bit brighter red than that. So I got a shot of that with someone walking past. I've obviously saturated the colours a bit more here, maybe a bit too much, but there we go. I want to emphasise the colours. The sky has also, because I've emphasised the blue, it's done the colours, the blue there as well, too much. This one I think is a better shot. It's simple. And that's one of the elements that I like to look for if possible. Obviously in a lot of the reflection shots it's not possible to do simple, but this one I thought was quite simple with just the colours and a guy walking past. I was about 3 or 4 inches too late getting that shot, but had he been back just a tiny bit further, that might have been perfect. But I like the colours. This one was this was typical street photography. I was walking around and I spotted this telephone box, an old telephone box. Don't think it's a telephone box now, but anyway, it's still there. And the glass or perspex, whatever it is, was really pretty scarred and scratched and made an interesting textured surface. And then I had there's a kind of monument in the middle of the little square here, and I thought that'd be a nice bright patch. Get the texture, bright patch, someone walking past might make an interesting image. And I was just about to do it and a van came along and parked right in the way here. No matter where I tried to get to, I couldn't get much more of this bright white monument in the shot. So I walked off and I came back, and a bit later the van was still there, and in fact also a council van had parked right in front, and so I had to walk away again. I did some more shots and I came back again. Council van had gone, but the van was still there. So I took this shot anyway. The van might have been there for the rest of the day, I don't know. But I got this shot, guy walking past against the bright shadow there with some of the texture. Quite like that as well. So they're the shots I got, and that's the sort of thing that I do for my street photography. So it's as I said back before I did the shoot, it's not so much about the people, it's about the people being an equal player in the whole scene and I think that sort of comes out in most of these shots. These aren't shots of people, they're shots of the environment with people in, and that's my kind of street photography that I'm working on and practicing on, and I'll keep you updated if I get any new hints or tips or think anything might be useful. If you've got any questions, obviously get back to me, and I will do my best to answer them. Thanks for watching.